Welcome back. You are tuned in to Traders Nation. The family residence is the backbone of the American economy, the most valuable and enduring asset for those who have achieved a financial foothold. Yet, today, record number of households confront foreclosure. In the next year, it is estimated that over 2 million Americans will lose their homes and almost $2 billion of wealth will disappear in the process. How did the traditional American dream morph into a nightmare for so many? Please welcome my guest today, Shari Olefson, author of Foreclosure Nation, Mortgaging the American Dream. Shari, welcome to Traders Nation. How are you today?
Thanks so much. I'm great, and thanks for getting this important information out to the listeners.
Oh, you're more than welcome. We both know, right, how important it is, especially in today's rough economic conditions and the housing market. All right, so what happened? How did the whole housing crisis start?
Well, you know what? It really is tough out there. And you see, even the people like us who may not be in foreclosure, we all know someone who is.
Right.
And we can trace it back to 5 or 6 different sort of a perfect financial storm. But what's really at the forefront now, since we're focusing a lot on people's modifications and refinances, is a lot of bad decisions. And we're in the middle right now of what I call the Great American Do-Over. We've got another chance to get it right.
Sure.
So it's important that we focus on doing it the right way this time.
All right, so 5 different things. I think we all had a hand in the problems that are going on, at least most of us, right? I mean, we're talking maybe some deregulation, some regulation, some government intervention, non-intervention. People that should have probably known what they were getting into probably weren't educated enough. So really, a lot of this caused it, correct?
Right, absolutely. And what started with what we call the real estate subprime crisis about 1.5 years, 2 years ago has really reverberated onto Wall Street in a much broader economic crisis, which is not as much the focus of the book Foreclosure Nation, Mortgaging the American Dream. We focus more on our average homeowners and what they can do at this point, but we do cover what sounds like complicated topics on Wall Street, the credit default swaps and the auction rate securities.
Sure.
They really were faulty instruments, and those fault lines just became bigger and bigger and bigger after the subprime crisis. But, as far as the residential foreclosures go right now, there are a couple things that people can do to save themselves. The first thing I tell people to do is absolutely do not panic.
Right.
Because this is not your father's foreclosure with all the stigmas that came with it. There's not, the negativity that used to be attached to it. There's no need to be embarrassed. There are 9,000 people a week in America who are losing their homes.
Wow.
We originally thought, remember about 1 year ago, all the statistics were telling us about 2 million people would lose their homes. Now it's looking more like 5 to 6 million people,
right,
which is huge. I don't know. Do you remember about 1 year ago when we were first talking about the bailout number? I think it was like $2 billion
yes,
at the discount window in those 5 lenders.
Yes.
I mean, that seems like a joke now. We're at 1.2 trillion now.
I know. It's almost like that gas thing where, you complained at $2, but when you got to $4.50, $2 looked great,
Absolutely. It's all relative. It's all relative. But, the number one thing that I'm seeing with the residential homeowners right now is a lack of communication. I mean, people are just afraid to call their lenders. They don't want to deal with the hassle. I talk to so many people that one of the first questions I ask is, have you read your loan documents? And it's amazing. I mean, there's no pictures, so they're not exciting. It's not very fun stuff.
Right.
But how many people have still not read their loan documents?
Right.
At the closing, there's no time for that. But certainly now, if you're at risk of losing your home, reading your loan documents is probably a good idea.
Yeah, Shari, let's talk about this because communication is important in any scenario. You've got to communicate. If you owe money to somebody, communicate with them. Let them know that you're concerned because they'll know that you're concerned by just the fact that you called them, you picked the phone up and you said, hey, listen, I want to pay or I'm going to try to pay. Can we work something out? Or just call them, but communicate, right, Shari? You got
to call them. It's what you have with your lender is called a relationship, and it's no different than your husband or wife or anyone else. And you know what? If you call your lender, all of a sudden in their computer system, you get put into a different bucket. You get put into the bucket of people who have indicated that they want to try to work something out. But the other reason you got to call them is because there's a serious lack of information on the homeowner's part.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the first things you need to know if you're hoping to be able to qualify under the new Obama modification plan is, what kind of loan do you have? Is my loan owned and serviced or guaranteed by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac? What are my ratios going to look like? There are a lot of questions. Hey, how long is this foreclosure process going to take? Because part of the thing is it varies by lender from lender to lender, their own internal processes, and then it also varies from state to state. The state laws, whether it's a judicial foreclosure state or a trustee state, and we talk about that a lot on the website, foreclosurenationthebook.com, so people can get information and see which kind of state they're in.
All right, and we'll give that website out at the end too, by the way. Now, Shari, listen. So call the lender, see if they have programs, because they're less resistant today than, let's say, they were a year ago. They don't want to be homeowners, or they don't want that property back. They would rather have the money, and they're more a little bit at ease to deal with their borrowers, aren't they?
Absolutely. And, if you qualify for one of the new modification plans, there are a couple. A lot of this is just luck. I mean, if you happen to be lucky enough to be with one of the top big servicers, the government has signed a contract with them now. They've given them, they're the recipient of the biggest part of that, $75 billion so far, and so those guys are working hard. If you're with another servicer or lender, you may not be as lucky, but, maybe you'll still be able to qualify for one.
Right. Okay.
And certainly calling the lender is the first thing. After that, after you get some information, it's really time for some self-assessment, because I'll tell you, we hear a lot of these numbers, and I think you'll agree with this. A lot of people during the bubble got into homes that they really couldn't afford. They're not ever going to be able to afford. I mean, no matter how much you dress up a mortgage, if it's still too big of a home, and it's not just the mortgage payment, it's the real estate taxes, the insurance, the air conditioning bill on a 5,000 square foot home is twice of what it would be on a 2,500 square foot home.
Right.
So if you really can't afford it, if you're not going to get in that, 31% ratio or somewhere near that, you really need to get realistic. So self-assessment is really part of the 5-step process that we describe in the book too, and just looking at your situation and making decisions more like our grandparents made, those financial decisions that, don't spend more than what you make.
Right. It's like coming down to the kitchen table and say, listen, we got to map ourselves out a plan, and then we have to execute that plan. So let's say they can move on and they're able to sell their home, get out of that to reduce themselves down from that 5,000 square foot home to, let's say, a 2,500 square foot home. That's what they need to do. What's the best way? Is it still the internet? Is a good way to go out, shop for those low fees and interest rates? Because let's face it, historically, interest rates are low.
Right. Interest rates are great. It's a great time. And, most realtors around the country will tell you that they are seeing activity now. Sales are up in that first-time home buyer bracket because, those guys are getting good values on homes, and they're getting great deals on mortgages. Those are the loans that are available to people. But, if you can sell your home through a short sale, that's a much better way to go, or through, if you can get full value for it, that's a much better way to go, because you'll be able to qualify for a new mortgage quicker, and it's not going to impact your credit as much. But, you raised a really good question, which is, how do you know who to trust? Do you go online? Do you trust a reference? And absolutely, you need to vet out the people, whether it's a mortgage broker or one of these modification companies that you're going to be hiring. You need to make sure that you check them out. And again, in the book, we include, some red flags for predatory lending and mortgage fraud and the scammers, so that you can try to stay away from those guys. Yeah,
because those professionals are supposed to be professional, but they're not always in your best interest. Good idea.
Guess what? All of these guys, there's some good guys out there, so I don't want to sound too jaded about this. But guess what? The bad guys who were the real mortgage scammers from 3 or 4 years ago, guess what they're doing now?
Yeah. Making license plates?
They didn't become, pathologists or doctors. They're doing mortgage modifications.
Right. All right. Now, give us that website again. We got about a minute left, Shari. What's the website again?
Sure. It's foreclosurenationthebook.com.
Okay. All right.
And you'll find all kinds of information, and listeners can also email me a question. I'd be happy to help answer, point them in the right direction.
Fantastic. All right, now, Foreclosure Nation, the book, Mortgaging the American Dream. Where can we find a copy of that, Shari?
Available through the website, on Amazon.com, at any Barnes & Noble store.
Right, very, very important. For millions of Americans out there should have a copy of this Foreclosure
Nation.
Great
resource. For about $12, you can save yourself a lot of money.
Oh, and a lot of headache, too, Shari. Let's face it. Yeah. All right. Shari Olefson, thanks for being with us today. Do appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You're more than welcome. Get a copy today. Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com is another great place where you can pick up a copy of Foreclosure Nation.